Hello and welcome to OCN NI Malpractice Training. My name is Jonathan Lana. I'd like to welcome you to this session in which we're going to consider what is a very important issue: learner malpractice, centre maladministration. The fact that you're listening today or willing to view this presentation tells me you recognise this is a very important issue. Indeed it is. It's an issue which we expect centres to be on top of and to deal with. And it's our hope that today that this presentation will enable you to be more effective in doing this. So first of all, let's consider what is malpractice? What are we dealing with? Well, malpractice is any activity which deliberately contravenes regulations and compromises the integrity of the internal or external assessment process and or the validity of certificates. Now, malpractice includes learner malpractice and staff maladministration. So malpractice is a general term including both these issues: learner malpractice, staff maladministration. Very often they are two sides of the same coin. We could view staff maladministration as a junior partner, but indeed probably they're equal in stature in terms of how we consider them. So let's move on and consider what is maladministration. Maladministration is any activity which results in non-compliance with administrative regulations and requirements. So if your centre is basically not doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of its delivery of assessment and its quality processes, this includes the application of persistent mistakes or poor administration within the centre. So it could be inappropriate learner records. So why are they addressed together? While cases of malpractice and maladministration can occur independently, and indeed they do, very often issues arising combine both factors. So an example of this could be of a centre collaborating with learners to provide access to inappropriate material assessment. So a centre is undertaking maladministration in that they're providing learners with materials which undermine assessment, and there's malpractice on the part of the learner in that they are accessing these materials. So while it's technically one event, with the two sides here, with malpractice and maladministration, of course malpractice can occur and does occur independently of any centre conspiracy, and this is the usual case. And so we'll consider that first, and then maladministration. Often the outcome of maladministration may be or will be an unfair advantage for a learner, but they may not be any fault on the part of the learner. So they can both occur in tandem, they can occur independently, but we're going to consider them together because they both are very serious issues and related issues. So first of all, let's consider some examples of learner malpractice. First and foremost, we have plagiarism. Plagiarism, of course, is the taking of material from others is not your own. It's inauthentic evidence provided for assessment. It could be, in this instance, a learner copying from another learner during assessment. It could be copy and pasting from the web, or drawing material from the web to complete an assignment which does not reflect learning. So plagiarism is a very common example of malpractice, and one which we need to be well aware of. Completing assessments with access to unauthorised materials to give or to obtain an unfair advantage. So if the learner has access to materials at assessment which can undermine the capacity of the assessment to evaluate the learner's undertaken, then this is malpractice. We have disruptive behaviour during assessment. This will undermine or negatively impact other learners. It's malpractice on the part of a learner. Impersonation. It's very important that your centre is confident that the learners are who they say they are. If a learner were to try to be say they're somebody else who they are not. They impersonate somebody else in assessment. Purpose being that they can complete the assessment, whereas the learner who should be taking the assessment could not do that. Therefore, someone's obtaining an award, a certificate or award which they do not deserve. This is malpractice. Breaching assessment material security. It is a responsibility of centres to keep materials secure. If a learner conspires to breach his security, to access assessment material which can then give an unfair advantage in assessment, this is obviously inappropriate. The failure to follow assessment instructions. So the learner does not take on board or do what they've been asked to, instructed to do during assessment. Again, another example of learner malpractice. So moving on, we're going to consider examples of centre maladministration. Now we have 4 slides here to give examples of maladministration. The fact that there are more does not indicate, as I've said before, a greater severity on the part of maladministration in contrast to learner malpractice. We want you to view both with equal severity and equal repugnance. First of all, inappropriate support of or collaboration with learners in production of assessment evidence. Now when your staff in your centre provide tuition to learners, we have a degree of collaboration with learners. There needs to be support for learners in learning, and to an extent there needs to be guidance in assessment. But there is a boundary, and when that boundary is exceeded, in terms of collaboration, we have a case of maladministration. Learners are given an advantage in completing assessment which undermines the capacity of that assessment to reflect the learning. That boundary may be not clearly observable for you, and you need to identify where that is. You need to work out how far can we go in terms of supporting learners. If the learners are given material just to reproduce in assessment, if they're given material to copy and paste, for example, then that is inappropriate. It's the counterpoint of learner malpractice in this instance. The falsification of tutor, observation or witness statements. Now, within your centre you have different strategies for assessing learners. Within your armoury you can have tutor observation and witness statements. With these strategies, the assessor will sign off that a learner is able to complete certain assessment criteria satisfactorily. Now, if this is falsified, this is directly an action by the assessor, by the centre. It is not malpractice on part of the learner, therefore it is maladministration. Changing assessment outcomes without justification. If a learner has not achieved and this outcome is changed without warrant to learner achieving, this is maladministration. The failure of the centre to confirm the learner's identity. This is the counterpoint, again, the other side of the coin to the impersonation malpractice example. It is a responsibility of the centre to confirm that the learner is who they say they are. It is a responsibility of the centre to have a process and procedure to undertake this. And so we'll look at that in more detail later on, but learners must be who they say they are. The willful inclusion of inauthentic evidence. If the learner includes inauthentic evidence, this is malpractice. It's possible for the centre, the assessor, to do this, to introduce evidence, to bolster up an assessment, to enable a learner to have achieved when otherwise they wouldn't. Changing assessment schedules without consent of learners. Obviously, assessment will follow an assessment plan, which should, to an extent, have a transparency to learners. They know what is to take place, how they're going to be assessed. They should be aware of these things to support them in assessment. If this is changed to the disadvantage of learners, we consider this as malpractice. The failure in assessment supervision. Assessments quite often are supervised events, supervised by the assessor. It could be that supervision may be required for a number of reasons, usually to confirm authenticity of evidence generated, or there may be a requirement to do with reasonable adjustments, which we'll mention later on. This needs to be undertaken. Inappropriate or unregulated implementation of reasonable adjustments or special considerations. So reasonable adjustments are very important in the delivery of assessment, very important in your centre quality. Reasonable adjustments allow learners to access assessment and learning where they otherwise would be hindered. It's not about making the process simpler for them, but it's about overcoming obstacles. Now, in doing this, you're required as a centre to record and justify the adjustment or the special consideration. There may be a permission requirement you should implement, and there could well be a supervision requirement for the implementation of the adjustment as mentioned already. It could be you need to supervise a transcription or a practical assistant, for example. So these need to be applied appropriately. If not, we are in breach of our administrative requirements. The falsification of assessment records. It is possible for you as a centre to act fraudulently in falsifying assessment records. This obviously is wrong. It doesn't need this presentation to tell you that is wrong, but it's something which can be performed or undertaken by a centre in order to get achievement for learners and certificates for learners who do not deserve them. Likewise, claiming certificates for non-achieving or fictitious learners. It may be in the interest of a centre to have a certain number of learners receiving certificates. This could be for funding requirements or for the completion of monitoring requirements. This is obviously fraudulent and inappropriate and will be dealt with very severely by OCNI if identified. Non-compliance with retention requirements. Now, as a centre, you are required to retain evidence of assessment for a period of time to be able to stand over what you've done. These requirements are that you retain a minimum of 2 portfolios per run for a minimum of 3 years following the September after, going on from the September after assessment, for the 3 academic years after assessment. These portfolios you're maintaining, these samples maintained, can be originals, they can be copies or digital copies. If you fail at any of these aspects, is in non-compliance with the requirements. And then we have non-compliance with quality assurance requirements. You are expected to undertake quality processes within your centre as drivers for quality, but also as monitors for quality. If you fail to do this, you're failing in your duties as a centre. The late registration of achieving learners only. It is possible, and some centres I'm aware would do this, register only learners that have achieved. So register learners after assessment when they know they have achieved. When you register learners, you're really registering an opportunity for learners to achieve. And learners to fail or to not achieve is not an indication of poor quality within the centre. The opposite is the case. It is an indication you're willing to maintain good standards in assessment, appropriate standards in assessment, and in certain cases we can expect that learners will not achieve for whatever reason. That's not to say that if learners do all achieve this, something gone wrong. Obviously that's not the case. But late registration of learners is maladministration. Learners should be registered prior to assessment, not post-assessment. The failure to maintain security of assessment materials. This is the counterpoint again of the breach in assessment material security. If learners have breached your security, then the question must be asked, have you got sufficient security on your assessment materials? Are they being stored appropriately? Are they in a locked filing cabinet? Are they in a locked room? Do learners have access to them without authority? And then we have the failure to address cases of learner malpractice. This is maladministration. If malpractice is present, if it's identified, but it's overlooked, if no sanctions are applied, if that learner is not dealt with appropriately, as will be specified later on in this presentation, if this is not undertaken, again, we have maladministration. So centres are expected to maintain ethical and proper administration of all assessment and quality processes. Learner malpractice and centre maladministration are not to be tolerated, and so demonstrable measures and procedures must be in place to counter them that go beyond standard quality assurance processes. You must take these things seriously. Malpractice and maladministration are issues of great importance for you as a centre in your delivery and your quality. They are of great importance to OCN NI as the awarding body, and processes must be in place, demonstrably in place, to address both of them. So what procedures should a centre have in place? Well, you should have measures to start with to verify learner identity. This is to address the issues of impersonation. You should have adequate security measures, as mentioned already. Your assessment materials should be kept securely, and availability of assessment materials which could undermine the quality or fairness of assessment should not be allowed. Measures to confirm assessment authenticity should be in place. This could include learner statements of authenticity confirming that the work is their own, it's authentic, it's not, and they haven't plagiarized or undertaken any other malpractice in its generation. Documented processes to address malpractice issues with learners prior to learning or assessment. It may be that you consider your assessment not to be particularly vulnerable to malpractice, and that may be a fair comment, a fair view of what you do. But what we do want you to have is a demonstrable and transparent process to bring the attention of learners to the issues of malpractice and to raise possible sanctions for malpractice with them. This should be prior to learning, prior to assessment. It should not be an ad hoc process left in the hands simply of the assessor, but it should be a standardized, transparent and documented process. And the centre also, your centre should have monitoring procedures for identified malpractice risk. So what we would need you to do is look at your assessment, look at its vulnerabilities to malpractice, and identify what they are. So it could be that you consider your assessment to be vulnerable to plagiarism, possibly web-based plagiarism. You need to have procedures, clear procedures you can undertake to address that and manage that risk. Okay, so what paperwork should a centre have in place to address malpractice and maladministration? Well, your centre should have the OCN NI Centre Handbook. This has a section on malpractice. This deals directly with the issues of malpractice and maladministration dealt with in this presentation. Your centre should also have a malpractice policy which deals with these issues. It is a responsibility of your centre that staff have access to these documents, all staff. It's not just the responsibility of a quality contact or an internal verifier. All active staff involved in the delivery of qualifications should have access to malpractice policies and to the OCN NI Centre Handbook. They should be aware of it. They should be aware of the implications for any breaches of policies and procedures. These documents can be found in the centre login section, your centre login section of the OCN NI website. So, active prevention of malpractice. Overall, the most effective way of preventing potential malpractice or maladministration is to ensure that your centre provides an open, supported and safe learning environment. If you can adhere to these general concepts, then you're well on the way to addressing these issues, and we can have confidence in your centre that it is not vulnerable to these problems. So examples of prevention which you can apply: provide learners with accurate information, provide appropriate course advice, of course provide high quality training, ensure safe learning environments, provide additional support as appropriate, implement reasonable adjustments as appropriate, and ensure good communication between staff and learners. So if malpractice has occurred, you've identified cases of learner malpractice, how do we deal with this? First and foremost, identified malpractice should always be investigated and always reported to OCN NI. Individuals being investigated for malpractice must be informed in writing at the earliest opportunity. This must detail the malpractice and possible consequences or sanctions which can be applied for malpractice. Any individual accused of malpractice must be given the opportunity to respond to allegations. Dealing with maladministration. Accusations of maladministration should be investigated independently. If an anonymous accusation is made, it will be investigated if sufficient evidence is provided or if serious enough to warrant investigation on the claim alone. So allegations of maladministration should be backed up with evidence, but it's up to your discretion to what extent ones without evidence are investigated. If they're very serious, then good practice would be that your centre investigates them anyway. Where there is evidence of maladministration, staff disciplinary policies and procedures will apply. So, the reporting and recording of these events. Written reports of investigations should include details of all the facts, details of any circumstances and details of investigations carried out, written statements from persons under investigation or from other persons involved, details of mitigating circumstances, and details of the conclusions as to whether and what malpractice is deemed to have taken place. An independent advisor will be appointed to consider each case individually in the implementation of the report. This will be to review the report, to decide whether the correct procedures have been adhered to ensure the individual accused of has had a fair chance to reply, to review the conclusions of the report, and to discuss and agree appropriate penalties or actions. Okay, so the rationale for learner sanctions. In proven cases of malpractice, centres should apply sanctions. These sanctions should be guided by the following: to prevent learners from gaining an unfair advantage, to maintain the integrity of the assessment, to maintain confidence in the quality of awarding procedures, and any sanction or penalty imposed will reflect the severity of the malpractice. So if we perceive the malpractice case to be more severe, the sanction should be also more severe. The following are examples of possible learner sanctions. an official warning from the centre to the learner, the non-achievement of the learner in assessment, disqualification of the learner from the whole qualification, and the disqualification of the learner from all qualifications. The responsibility to OCNI of the centre, all allegations of malpractice must be reported to OCNI in line with the OCNI centre approval terms and conditions. In cases where centre maladministration is evident, the following sanctions can be applied by OCNI to the centre. Actions to address failures. This could be a plan in response to an external verification visit or a direct investigation into the centre's performance. The withdrawal of direct claims from the centre, the withdrawal of a qualification from the centre's delivery, and finally, and most severely, the withdrawal of centre recognition. It's our hope that these sanctions are never applied to your centre, and we hope that what you've learned in this presentation today will enable you to effectively counter learner malpractice and maladministration and improve your overall quality and performance. Thank you.